Okay, welcome to the sixth lecture. Today we're going to talk about different ways of applying styles to a web page. And you'll recall that styles are techniques that we use in order to change the way a web page looks or the way the HTML markup is displayed. Up until this point, we've been using a technique called inline, in that the style statements or the instructions that we provide to change the look of the text is in line with the HTML markup. So let's take a look at some examples. If we go to our lecture notes and we go to the fifth lecture, we'll see a link for ways of applying styles. Now this first page, and I should make a note here, this page actually does have styles applied to it. Again, the color of this text, the text being underlined while I mouse over, they're all part of the style, the font that's selected. So technically, there are some minor styles being applied, but for all practical purposes, there aren't. And if you look at the HTML between the horizontal rules, you'll see that there's no style statements in the HTML. So let's right click on the white space and take a look at the source code. And if we take a look at it, we'll see that we have some text in an H1 tag. We have some hyperlinks inside of an H2 tag that link to the various pages that are part of this lecture. We're currently on a page that is described as no style. We'll look at a page that has inline, embedded, and finally a cascading style sheet. All right, we have a paragraph of text. We have a header inside of an H3 tag. And again, you'll notice that the different headers, H1, H2, H3, in terms of decreasing level of prominence. And we have a horizontal rule, which is a self-terminating tag. We have a HTML tag called main. And main is the main section of the website. Again, by itself, it does nothing, but it just identifies the main portion of the page. We have a div, and similarly, a div does nothing by itself, but it's a way of organizing or grouping portions of a page without giving any indication of what type of content it contains. Unlike main, which tells you it's the main portion. And that's basically it. We close out the main, we have another horizontal rule. And if you look at the text, there are no style statements in here. You have an image tag, you have a anchor tag with a hyperlink, but there are no styling statements on this page. And again, if we go back to the page itself, this is the way it appears. Let me go back to 100%. So this is the way it appears, right? So let's go to a page where there are some styles applied, but they're in line. And again, in line the way we've been applying styles up until this point. And we'll see that the presentation of the information is a little different. It's similar to what you were asked to do on your About Me page. We have an image, we have some text that's floating right on the image, and we see that the image is inside of a area that has a blue background. So let's take a look at these inline styles. Again, we'll right click on the white space and view source. And let's blow this up a little bit. So now we have, again, it's the same HTML, but here we're going to see some style statements applied to it. So the horizontal rule, for example, has a style, and this style is a border style. Now we've talked about border styles before when we defined the border type, the border width and color. Here we're doing it all in one statement. So border, colon, border being what we're changing, and everything after the colon is how we're changing it. So in this case, the border's width is 1 pixel, which is the smallest width possible. It's a solid border, just a straight line, and this is the color. So this is a color uh, given in hexadecimal format. You recall from the earlier lecture that this is terms of RGB, where the first two characters are the red component, the next is the blue component, and the final two are the green component. And these combinations of red, green, and blue will give you millions of different colors. Here is a website that's called HTML color codes. There are some sites that are also listed in the student resources page of the website. But again, there are always new sites coming aboard with presenting the information in different ways. So today I use this site to get the hex values of different colors. And I find that if you use colors along a column, they're complementary. So I just pulled 2 colors off this row to use on the page. All right, and so if you mouse over a particular color on this page, it'll give you the hex value. If we go back to the page source, so this is the hex value that I'm using, and when you use hex values for colors, you use the hash symbol in front of it. Now, again, in the past we've used color names like red or green, but you can fine tune the colors to a greater level of detail when you use the hex code, and that's normally what I use when I use colors. The next style statement is being applied to that div. And in this case, the div is surrounding the image and the text. So again, the div by itself does nothing. It only does something when you apply a style statement to it. And here we have a style statement that says max width is 70%. The next statement, margin auto, is actually a statement that we use to center the div on the page. The background color, again using a hex value for that light color of blue. We have a border radius of 5 pixels, and we have a border padding of 10 pixels. And the padding is the distance between the edge of the border and the content inside the border. And if we look back at the page, we can see the rounded portion of the div. We can see the 10 pixels between the content inside, in this case the image and the edge, and of course the background color. If we were to continue and look at the image, we'll see a style statement associated with the image. And here's where we're doing the floating left. We're padding right. We're padding right to put a little space between the text and the right-hand side of the image. And the max width is 33%. If we look at this page, this image is again 33% of the block that it's in, not 33% of the width of the page. So it's 33% of the block it's in. In this case, the block is the div. So this div that's highlighted with the background of that light blue color, this image is 1/3 or 33% of the width of it. And if we were to come and narrow this page a bit, you can see that the image starts to get smaller and smaller. Okay. Again, never exceeding or maintaining a maximum width of 33%. And finally, what else do we have? And we're applying the same style to the horizontal rule at the end of the page. So we have a horizontal rule here it's a bit more prominent, you can see it, and we have a horizontal rule at the bottom. Now again, we're noting that these style statements are in line right inside the HTML code. The, the efficiency of this is that when you use inline styles, you have to uh, write them on every single page. Now, if I created, say, a bunch of pages like this for each of you in the class, and I wanted to change, if I decided to float the image right as opposed to floating left, I have to go to every single page and change that HTML. And again, that's obviously not practical. Here's another way of applying styles. Let's go to the embedded page. Now the embedded page is, in terms of the way the page looks, this markup, this content looks, is identical to the previous page, but there's a substantial difference in the way the page is written. If we take a look at its source code, and if we look at the horizontal rule, there's no style statement. There's no style statement associated with the div. Comparing this to the no style page, the only difference in the HTML is this class associated with this image tag. So how are these style statements being applied? Where is the background color being applied? Well, all of that information all of those styles are being applied in the head portion of the document and a series of style statements. So these style statements are inside of a style tag. We have the open and close style tag, and all of the style statements that were in line in the previous page are now stored up in the head of the document. And that offers some benefits. So if we wanted to change the styles, we can make all the changes that are necessary right up here at the top. But let's take a look at some of these styles and see how they're invoked. So we have a style statement. Now they're listed a little differently. The first portion of the style statement is the target. What element are you changing? And inside squiggly brackets are the style statements telling you how you're changing it. So in this case, we are saying for all of the horizontal rules, have a border of 1 pixel, a solid border, and use this color. Now I could, change the border style if we were to edit this page. Now if I went into the style statement and said, you know what, I want a 10 pixel border and I want the color to be red. And let's save this. Now if I reload this page, we see that the horizontal rule, both at the top and at the bottom, changes the characteristics to match the style. So I was able to change the horizontal rule in 2 locations by merely changing the style statement at the top of the page. Right, so I didn't have to go into the horizontal rule here and the horizontal rule here in order to make those changes. I was able to make them in both places on the page by changing it in one location. Now if I undo these changes, save the page, and we'll observe that the style of the horizontal rule goes back to the way it was before. Let's look at the rest of it. We have so that's for the horizontal rule. So we have horizontal rule, space, inside squiggly brackets, how we're changing that particular targeted item. And in this case, it's horizontal rule. Here, we're targeting divs, but only the divs in the main portion, the main block. So we have divs inside the main tag. And what are we doing with those? we're saying we want the maximum width to be 70% of the page. We have margin auto, which centers that div in the page, and we talked about this. The background color, the border dash radius 5 pixels, and the padding 10%. So if I, for example, got rid of the main constraint and said apply this, let's go to the editor, excuse me. If I came here and said, let's get rid of the restriction on main and apply this to all divs, if I save this and reload the page, we see that the div in my menu now has the characteristics of as this div here, as well as the div for my comment section. So that's why I'm targeting only the divs in the main portion of the web page, and that statement. So by prefacing the div with main, I'm only targeting the divs inside the main section of the page. So if I save this, reload the page, the style does not get applied to the div that's up here. It's only the divs in the main portion of the page. Let's look at the other ways of targeting styles. So we targeted the horizontal rule, we targeted divs, but only divs within the main. And here's that bio image class. So we can create classes, and these are style statements that can be applied to any tag that the class is applied to or associated with. So you create a class with period, and you give it a name. Ideally, you give the class a name that's reflective of what the class is doing. So in this case, I'm giving the class a name called bio image, which I would apply to images that are bios. And again, it's the same style statement: float colon left, padding right, max width 33%. So, but again, the format is all the style statements are within squiggly brackets. Now, there is a way to comment out styles, and inside of a style statement, if you want to comment them, it would be /star, and you can see that that style statement color has changed to green. And if I want to end the comment, it's */. All right, so if I save this change and I reload the page, you notice the image got a little bit bigger. The text is no longer floating the way it was before because I got rid of the style statement, and the image doesn't change size as I change the page's size, the page's width. So let's go back, take the commenting off. You see that in the editor, the color coding changes as well. And if we save this, reload the page, the style comes back. All right, so that's embedded styles. So embedded styles offer a benefit of allowing you to change styles without having to go into the HTML itself. And for a small page like this, the benefit is not particularly great, but for a very long page, maybe tens of thousands of characters, plowing through a long document, making changes can be quite tedious. This way of applying styles in the head of a single page has the same limitation as the inline styles do, and that is you have to edit every page individually. And so the preferred technique of applying styles is to use what's called a cascading style sheet. So if we take a look at another page, if we were to go and look at the source of this page, the Cascading Style Sheet page. If we look at the HTML, you see there's no styles associated, applied to it. We still have this class for the image. And there is no embedded style in the head of the document. So where the style is being applied. Here you see a statement that says there's a link to a style sheet, and the format of that link is as we see here. So there's a hyperlink reference to the style sheet, and here we're saying that this is what we're looking at as a style sheet. If we were to click this link, we could actually take a look at the style sheet. And if you notice, so the style sheet, the file name in this case is style.css. So .css tells the web server that this is a cascading style sheet. And the format of the cascading style sheet is very different than the HTML document. All the things that we're accustomed to seeing with the HTML document are absent. And in fact, the style sheet, the format of it is exactly the same as the embedded style, except for we don't have the opening and closing style statements. We know it's a style sheet, so those tags aren't necessary. So again, the style statements are exactly the same as they were in the embedded style. And so we created that file, and we reference it from this using this statement in the head of our document. Now, if we mistyped the style statement, so let's go into the editor and edit the page with the style sheet. And again, this is the line that makes those changes. If there was a typo in the style sheet, let's just put a trailing space in the file name. If we were to save that and go back to our page with the cascading style sheet and refresh it, we see that the style statements disappear. So that's actually a common error. If you create a style sheet and you don't see the styles being applied, one of the most common reasons for that is because either the file name is misspelled, or there's a syntax error in the way that you've referenced the style sheet. The style sheet isn't in the location that you're specifying. So just make sure that you're careful with the spelling of the names and the locations of the style sheet. Another thing to be careful of is if when you change the style sheet, here we're going to refresh this page again. I'm just going to click the recycle button. So we reload the page and we get the style statement back. Now keep in mind, sometimes when you reload the page, the cascading style sheet is not downloaded. So you have two portions of the two files that are required to two important files that are required in order to render this page. Obviously the HTML and also the CSS. So sometimes clicking the recycle button is not enough to download the CSS. I often find that you might have to, at least in Windows, you'll have to type Control F5 in order to get the cascading style sheet to be re-downloaded from the web server. All right. Now the cascading style sheet, the biggest benefit of it is that you can apply that style sheet to millions of web pages and make changes to millions of web pages by making changes in a single file. So if I was to go to cPanel and open up our style sheet, I've named mine style CSS, and if I want to come here and change this color, the background color of the div, if I want to just change it to red, just making a simple change, and if I reload this page, And here we're going to do the control F5, and we see that the background is changed to red. Now I didn't touch this HTML document, and if this style sheet is being referenced by 10 million different pages, 10 million different pages would change instantaneously. So this is a very powerful way of managing a website, managing the look and feel of a website. Because of the power of style sheets, and let me go back and change this to where it was, and I'm just typing Control Z to get that old color back and refresh the page. Control F5, get the color back. So the power of the style sheet is that, again, you can you can change the look of an entire website by just changing one file. This particular style sheet, if we were to click this link to look at it, it's pretty simple. Now, the style sheet that I use for my book website is probably a couple thousand lines long. So these style sheets can become pretty involved. But again, for a large, complex website, it makes managing them so much easier. You can make dramatic changes to an entire website very easily this way. The importance of cascading style sheets is such that going forward, you won't be able to use embedded or inline styles with any of your documents. So for future homework assignments, you will always use a cascading style sheet. And in the next lecture, we'll talk more about styles and the power of cascading style sheets.